They sold her like a saddle, mute, unneeded, and broken. Ella Mae stood on the auction block, dust swirling around her boots, lips pressed shut not by choice but by birth. A man with a brimmed hat and quiet eyes stepped forward. He offered 2 silver coins and his coat. She flinched when he reached out. But he only said, "You will not be cold tonight." She had no voice. He barely used his. Yet somehow, in that moment, they heard each other clearer than words ever could. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I was born in a house where silence was not peace. It was punishment. My name is Ella Mae Holloway, though it never mattered much to those who raised me. My mother died giving me breath, and my father never forgave me for the sound I never made. The midwife said I cried without a cry, mouth open, lungs full, but not a single sound. She whispered that I was touched by God, or cursed by him. Around here, it all depends on who is doing the judging. My brothers called me ghost tongue. My father called me worse. Said I was no use to man or land if I could not speak. I could work, and I did. I cooked, I cleaned, I mended fences and stitched shirts tighter than any store-bought hand. But still, no words meant no worth. And in the end, that is all folks saw. By the time I turned 20, my father owed a debt to a card sharp who came through every spring with whiskey on his breath and lies in his pockets. That year, Pa did not have coin. He had me. She don't talk none, but she listens good, he said, shoving me toward the stranger with a smirk. The man leaned close, breath sour and eyes greedy. I stared ahead, blank as I could. I had learned long ago not to blink when they got close. But the man shook his head and spat on the ground. Ain't buying no dumb girl. And just like that, I became too useless even for a gambler. The shame hit Pa hard. Hard enough he sold me at a livestock auction 3 days later. No name, no paperwork, just a whispered price and a lie about me being willing. I remember that day like a splinter in my chest. Dust clung to my dress. The sun baked the boards beneath my feet. Men pointed and murmured. One woman gasped. Another turned her face away. Then I saw him. A tall man, lean like a cedar post, with a face carved from quiet storms. His eyes met mine, not with hunger, not even with pity. Just stillness. Like he understood what it meant to be empty and full of pain at the same time. He paid. Took off his coat and wrapped it around me. Said nothing but this. You will not be cold tonight. And that was the first moment I felt human in over a decade. His name was Silas Boone. Folks called him Widow Boone. Though he had no child and his wife had died years back in childbirth, leaving behind an empty house and rumors that he had loved her too much to speak of it. He did not touch me. Not on the ride home. Not that night. Not ever, unless I offered my hand first. At first, I waited for the cruelty to come. It always came, eventually. Kindness was just a cloak folks wore until they got what they wanted. But Silas did not want anything, it seemed. He just made space for me. An extra plate, a clean bed, quiet tasks I could take up at my own pace. He left a small wooden slate and a piece of chalk on the table one morning. No note. No pressure. Just there, like a bridge left half-built, waiting to be finished if I chose. I did not write right away. I was afraid to. Because words, whether spoken or scratched, meant risk. They could be used against you, twisted, mocked. Silence had always been safer. But something in that man's stillness made me wonder. So I wrote one word. Thanks. When he saw it that evening, he only nodded once. Then he added, beneath it, welcome. It was the start of something strange and small. A slow blooming in hard soil. That winter, I would watch him from the porch while he broke ice from the troughs or carried hay bales with shoulders that bore more than weight. He never raised his voice. Not to me. Not to the animals. Not even when things went wrong. There was sorrow in him. I saw it like a shadow on snow. He had once known love, the kind that rips the heart from the chest when it ends. And though I had never been loved, I recognized the silence of someone who had been ruined by it. We were two broken things, not trying to fix each other, but just not breaking more. Some nights, when the wind howled and the fire crackled, I would curl on the floor beside the stove, fingers tracing words in the ashes, dreaming of saying them out loud. Just once. But I had no voice. And Silas never asked me to try. Instead, he started leaving little notes beside my plate. You are safe here. No one will take you. The barn cat misses you. It made me laugh, soundless, yes, but full. One day, I drew a tiny heart next to my name on the chalkboard. He looked at it for a long while. Then he added one beside his own name. We did not speak. But somehow we understood more than words ever could hold. Life on the ranch was honest, but it was not easy. Each morning came with its own kind of ache, the kind that comes from remembering you are not where you belong, even if no one is hurting you anymore. I woke before the sun, fed the chickens, chopped kindling, and swept out the barn until my fingers bled through the cloth. It was not because Silas asked me to. He never once told me what to do. But work was the one way I could prove I was not worthless. I had learned to move without sound. My steps made no creak, my breath no complaint. But silence has a way of making the air heavy. Silas noticed it. I could tell. Some evenings, he would sit on the porch and glance toward me like he wanted to say something. But the words always stayed in his throat. Sometimes I wanted to speak back. Not with chalk. Not with hands. With my own voice. But my body would not allow it. I tried once, late at night when I was alone in the root cellar. I pressed both hands to my chest, gathered all the air I could, and tried to say his name. Nothing. Just the sound of breath pushed too hard against a locked door. Sometimes that failure felt worse than any insult my father ever hurled. Silas never asked for my voice. But I could feel the weight of my absence. Like he missed something he never got to hear. We began to fall into a rhythm. A kind of shared routine where words were traded for nods and glances. I learned how he liked his eggs. He learned I braided my hair when I was angry and tucked it behind my ear when I was lonely. He fixed a second chair on the porch. Not for show. Not for company. Just for me. But peace has its enemies. And out here, peace is never left alone for long. The ranch hands talked when they thought I could not hear. They called me his little ghost. One said I must be some kind of curse. Why else would a man like Silas keep a girl like me around, if not for some unnatural reason? Another said maybe I was his penance. Maybe he killed his wife and kept me to make the ghosts quiet. Their laughter stayed in my bones longer than the cold. I never told Silas. But I started avoiding them, eating in the kitchen instead of the cookhouse, taking my bath after dark so no one would see me scrub the shame from my skin. I began hiding parts of myself again. The softest ones. Then one afternoon, a traveling merchant came through with a mirror. I had not seen my own reflection in almost a year. I stared at it a long while. Not because I liked what I saw, but because I did not know who it was anymore. The woman in the mirror was not a girl. Not a servant. Not a daughter. She looked almost strong, but her eyes still flinched like she expected pain. That night, I left Silas a chalk message on the kitchen wall. Do I belong here? He stared at it for a long time. Then he wrote beneath it, in his slow, careful hand, You belong wherever your soul is not afraid. It should have comforted me. Instead, I wept, because I did not know where that place was. And I feared that even this quiet ranch, with its slow kindness and warm fire, was just a borrowed peace. I began sleeping lighter, listening for doors, watching for glances. The ranch hands were not cruel. Not like my father, not like the gambler. But cruelty has cousins, indifference, suspicion, doubt. And I knew how easily those turned to something worse. One morning, I found a dead rabbit nailed to the barn door. No one claimed it. No one spoke of it. But everyone saw. Silas burned it without a word. But I saw something in his eyes that day, rage, wrapped tight in restraint. Later that night, he stood outside my door silent. I opened it. He did not come in. He just placed a knife on the table inside and walked away. I understood what he meant. He could not protect me from everything. I would need to protect myself too. But that knife felt heavy in my hand. Not because I feared using it, but because it meant I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing for war. That winter, the wind howled louder. The nights grew longer. And I began to wonder if silence could really keep me safe after all. It was a broken stirrup that finally made us look each other in the eye for more than a breath. I had been helping muck out the stalls when Silas came in, rubbing his shoulder like it ached deep into the bone. He reached for a saddle, tested the leather, and frowned. One stirrup was loose. I moved beside him, took the saddle gently, and pointed to the corner where he kept the spare pieces. He hesitated, then handed it to me like passing off a child. Together, we worked without a word, but not without meaning. He held the saddle in place. I threaded the strap. My hands brushed his once, and I nearly dropped the buckle. His skin was calloused and warm. He did not flinch. Neither did I. When it was done, he reached for the saddle, but not before signing something in the air. He touched his chest, then made a small circling motion. I did not know the signs yet, but I felt the question in his eyes. Are you all right? I nodded. Then I did something I had never done before. I touched my fingers to my lips, then pressed them to the saddle. A thank you, simple but mine. He nodded. A quiet smile tugged the corner of his mouth. And for the first time since arriving, I felt seen. Not as a chore. Not as a body. As a woman. A person. That night, thunder cracked the sky wide open. Rain poured like the heavens had something to say after all. Silas came into the barn late, soaking wet, his shirt clinging to his back. He was looking for a lantern. I was already there, curled in the hay, waiting out the storm with a blanket pulled tight around my knees. He saw me, paused, then sat down across from me, about as far as a whisper could travel. For a while we just listened. The rain against the roof. The thunder crawling across the fields. He did not ask why I was there. I did not ask why he stayed. But then he began to speak. Not much. Just pieces. She died with her eyes open. I blinked, startled. His voice was low, hoarse like it had not been used in weeks. My wife. Her name was Clara. She bled too much. They said it was quick, but it didn't feel quick. She looked right at me. And then she was gone. His words filled the barn like smoke. I reached for the chalkboard I sometimes carried in my satchel. Wrote slow, "Did you love her?" He nodded, eyes closed. Too much. Maybe that's why I stopped talking. Like the more I spoke of her, the more of her I lost. We sat with that. Then I wrote, "Do you talk to her still?" He opened his eyes. Sometimes. When the wind is loud enough, I think she might hear. I smiled. I could not answer with sound, but I held my hands up, slow, and began to move them through the air, like shaping something gentle. A lullaby without notes. My hands danced in circles and lines, soft and quiet, a silent song I had made up as a girl when no one came to tuck me in. Silas watched, still as prayer. When I finished, he swallowed hard and whispered, "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard." He looked at my hands, then at my face. "You don't need words, Ella Mae. You speak louder than most ever will." Tears came then, hot, fast, like spring rivers breaking winter ice. He did not reach for me. He did not need to. I had heard him. And, for the first time, I knew he had heard me. After that night in the barn, something changed between us, quietly, like a creek thawing under the spring sun. Silas started leaving me notes with small things. "Weather's turning, bring in the quilts," or "Found wild honey by the ridge." He added a second mug to the table each morning. And he began signing simple things. "Thank you, good night, you are safe," even when he still said them out loud. I could tell he was trying. Not to fix me, but to reach me. I began responding more too. Not just with chalk or hand motions, but with glances that lingered. Touches that asked without needing words. A shared laugh at the stubborn goat that followed me around like a dog. A rhythm was forming between us. Not quite love, not yet, but something rooted and growing. Still, the world outside our little ranch house was not so kind. One afternoon, we went into town for supplies. Silas needed lumber. I wanted thread and a few new jars for preserves. It had been months since I last saw Main Street, dusty porches, swinging signs, and men watching everything too close. As we passed the mercantile, a group of women stopped their chatter. Their eyes swept over me like cold water. One of them leaned to another and said, just loud enough, "That's the one he bought." They all laughed. Like I was an old story they thought was finished. Silas heard it. I saw his jaw tighten. But he did not speak. We finished our errands and rode home in silence. That night, I left a chalk message by the front door. "Do they think I am property?" He wrote underneath, "Let them think what they want. You know better." I wanted to believe that. But doubt does not leave easy when it is sewn into your skin from birth. That week, Silas started building something behind the barn. A small cabin. At first, I feared he was moving me out, that maybe kindness only stretched so far. But when I signed the question, he looked at me confused. "This is yours," he said. "Your space. Your name on the door if you want it." No one had ever built anything for me before. I traced the doorway with my fingertips. And for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future. A home. Not borrowed. Not feared. Mine. But peace, as I had come to learn, has sharp corners. One of the ranch hands, Nate, a younger man with wild eyes and too many questions, began lingering near me. Asking with gestures I understood too well. Hovering when Silas was not nearby. One evening, he reached for my braid, tugging it like a toy. I stepped back fast, eyes sharp. He laughed and said, "Just seeing if you can bark." Silas saw it from the porch. He came down like thunder. Did not yell. Did not hit. Just stood so close to Nate, the boy turned pale. You speak to her again without her asking, you'll be speaking through broken teeth. Nate left the ranch by morning. But something in me shifted. The world still saw me as someone who needed defending. Still saw me as mute, weak, strange. Even the kindness I received was sometimes rooted in pity. Silas and I stood in the half-built cabin that night. I touched the wood, smelled the fresh pine. Then I signed slowly, deliberately. I want to teach. I want to speak with more than my hands. He looked at me a long time, then nodded. I'll find someone, he said. Someone who knows more than me. That someone came in the form of a woman named Miriam. She was old, with strong hands and a presence like a grandmother. She had worked with deaf children in the mountains of Dakota Territory. Silas sent a letter. She arrived 3 weeks later in a wagon full of books, slates, and quiet wisdom. She did not ask what happened to me. She only said, "We will begin where you are, not where others expect you to be." And so we began. Letters. Sounds. Motions. I learned the shape of spoken words, even if I could not echo them. And Silas, he learned too. Sat beside me during lessons, fumbled the signs until they became second nature. When I fell asleep one night at the table, he carried me to the bed and left the alphabet chart tucked beneath my pillow. The town still whispered. But on the ranch, I began to bloom. And Silas? He started speaking more. To the horses. To the house. To me. Words not to fill space, but to mean something. Have you ever felt safest with someone who said the least? Share your story in the comments. Spring came slow that year, like it was unsure whether it should stay. The snow melted in patches, and the creek behind the barn ran louder than it had in months. Buds peeked out on the apple trees Silas had planted long ago. He said they had not borne fruit since Clara died. That changed too. One morning, I found a blossom on the lowest branch, white, trembling, perfect. I touched it with a reverence I could not name. Something inside me whispered that healing does not always roar. Sometimes it just grows. That same week, Silas took me to a place I had never seen before. Half a mile from the ranch house, beyond a cedar grove, where the land opened wide into a clearing full of wildflowers. Purple and yellow, dancing in the wind. The sky above it stretched so far, I thought it might lift me clean off the ground. He led me there without a word. Carried a blanket, a basket of bread and apples, and a small book. When we sat down, he said, "I used to come here with Clara." I looked at him unsure. He smiled faintly. "But she is not the only one I can love in silence." He opened the book. It was a poetry collection, Emily Dickinson, worn and marked with little pencil stars. He handed it to me and pointed to a page. I read the words slowly, tracing them with my finger. I never spoke with God, nor visited in heaven. Yet certain am I of the spot, as if the chart were given. I looked at him, heart trembling. He signed, "That is how I feel when I look at you." I had no answer, so I took his hand and placed it over my heart. It beat steady, strong. His eyes filled just a little. From then on, we met in that clearing every Sunday, after chores were done. We called it our speaking field, even if we rarely used words there. We brought books, letters, things we wanted to share but could not say aloud. Sometimes we sat in silence, hands barely touching, the wind doing all the talking. One afternoon, I brought the slate and wrote, "Have you ever thought about starting again?" He hesitated, then answered, "Every day since you arrived." That night, I moved into the small cabin he built me. Not because he asked, not because I had to, but because I was ready. He waited outside while I unpacked my meager things, 2 dresses, a hairbrush, a little wooden box that once belonged to my mother. Inside it, a photograph I had hidden since childhood, one where I was a baby in my mother's arms, before silence became my shadow. When I opened the door, he stood there with a bundle in his hands. A gift. A set of books, grammar, sign language, even one on teaching. And on top, a notebook with my initials burned into the leather, EMH. I touched it like it might vanish. Then he handed me a folded note. "You are not a burden. You are not a debt. You are not property. You are Ella Mae Holloway. And you belong to yourself first." I could not hold back the tears this time. They came in quiet waves. I reached for him. He did not pull me close right away. He just looked at me with the same calm reverence I had given that blossom on the tree. Then he said softly, "You do not have to speak, Ella. I hear you just fine." I leaned into his chest, and for the first time, I felt not just safe, but chosen. After that, we lived side by side, not as husband and wife, not yet, but as something gentler. He taught me how to read the sky, how to feel when the soil was ready for planting. I taught him how to speak my name with his hands. At night, I wrote in my notebook. Words poured out, fears, dreams, prayers. Sometimes he would read them, sometimes not, but they were mine. And for the first time, that was enough. The peace we had built was fragile, but it had roots. I felt it each morning when Silas passed me the coffee mug without needing to ask how I liked it. I felt it in the way the wind moved through the chinks in the cabin walls and carried our quiet laughter between the porch and the barn. We had something real. But in the West, nothing good stays untouched for long. He rode into town that morning to buy fence posts. I stayed behind to bake bread, humming a tune I had once heard as a child. No voice, just memory. I was folding the dough when the knock came. It was not a knock like Silas's, soft, steady. This one was sharp, loud, entitled. When I opened the door, I saw a face I had prayed never to see again. My oldest brother, Vernon. He looked like my father used to, weather-beaten, smirking, drunk on power. "Well, look what the crows dragged in," he said, pushing past me like he owned the air. I backed away, fingers trembling. "Thought maybe you died out here," he muttered, sniffing around like a dog. "Then I heard you were shacked up with some rich mute lover and living like a queen." I shook my head, trying to gesture him out. But he would not go. He walked through the cabin like he had built it himself. Picked up my notebook. Tossed it aside. Spit on the floor. "You always thought you were better than the rest of us. Just 'cause you were broken. Pa should have drowned you when he had the chance." I froze. Then he dropped the real reason he came. "There's a land dealer up north willing to pay double for your kind. Pretty quiet and dumb as a post." He grinned, teeth yellow. "You come back with me, Ella. Or I start talking to that sheriff. Tell him this rancher stole you. You think folks won't listen to me? A man!" The rage in me boiled like wildfire under dry brush. I stepped between him and the door. I signed, sharp and hard, "You do not own me." He laughed. "What's that? You casting spells now." Then he raised his hand. I flinched, but before it could land, Silas stepped through the door behind him. He did not say a word, just reached and grabbed Vernon by the collar and dragged him outside like yesterday's trash. My brother spat and cursed, but Silas never lost his calm. He pinned Vernon against the porch rail and said, voice low and sharp as a blade, "She is not for sale. She is not yours. She never was." Vernon snarled, "She's damaged. That's all she's ever been." Silas looked at me, his eyes steady, proud. Then he turned back to Vernon and said, "No, she's the strongest person I have ever known. And you? You are just loud." Then he let him go. Vernon stumbled down the steps, muttering threats. "You'll regret this. Both of you." He disappeared on horseback, dust kicking up like a warning. But the damage had been done. That night, I could not sleep. The warmth I had found began to feel like a blanket that might be snatched away at any moment. I wrote furiously in my notebook, page after page of memories, of the first time Vernon hit me, of how Pa laughed when I cried without sound, of how I used to pray for death just to escape. Silas found me by lantern light, curled on the porch steps with my knees hugged to my chest. He sat beside me, said nothing for a long while. Then he said, "You do not have to tell me. But if you want to, I am here." So I signed it. The whole thing. Every gesture was a scar. Every wordless phrase a wound. And when I was done, he reached out, not to hold me, but to let me know his hands were open. I leaned into him, not as a victim, but as a woman finally choosing what parts of herself to share. Still, something inside me had cracked open. And what poured out was grief I had never let myself feel. Because when your whole life is spent being told you are nothing, even peace feels borrowed. And I feared it would be taken. I ran before the sun came up. Left behind my boots, my books, and the half-finished loaf of bread on the counter. Left the cabin Silas built, the garden rose we planted. The promises neither of us had spoken but both of us felt. I ran because I was afraid. Not of Silas, but of what he might lose if he kept me. Vernon had poisoned the air with something I could not scrub out. He would not let this be. And the law, it always listened to men with big mouths and bad tempers. All it would take was a lie. One false story about how Silas took me. And I would be sent away, or worse, he would. So I ran. I left a note on the door in chalk, just 4 words. "Better this way. Forgive me." Then I walked into the woods barefoot, not caring about thorns or the cold morning soil. The wind had the scent of spring on it, but my bones felt like winter. I did not know where I was going. I only knew I could not stay. I wandered for hours, maybe more. Hunger bit first. Then came the ache in my legs. But I kept walking, fueled by fear, and something else, shame. I found an old trail that led to a creek. I followed it, thinking maybe I could cross it and keep going. But the current was stronger than it looked. I stepped wrong, slipped on a mossy rock, and tumbled hard. My head hit the edge of a stone. Stars burst behind my eyes. Then darkness. When I woke, it was near dusk. And I was not alone. A stranger had found me, a man younger than Silas, with slick hands and a cruel smile. He said he was a trapper, said I was lucky he saw me. But I knew that look. I had seen it before. On gamblers. On men who circled brothels. He helped me up, but his grip was too tight. When I tried to pull away, he said, "Come on now. You're pretty. Mute too? That's a rare prize." I kicked him. Hard. He stumbled back, but not far enough. He lunged, and I swung the only thing I had, a rock, sharp and wet. It hit his temple, and he dropped. I ran again, bleeding now, barefoot and half-conscious. I did not know where I was anymore. Eventually, I collapsed in a bed of pine needles, too weak to cry. The sky above me turned from orange to black, and I wondered if that would be the last sky I ever saw. Then footsteps. Not heavy ones. Soft. Careful. A woman appeared, older than me, with long gray braids and eyes like storm clouds. She wore a woven shawl and had a calm about her that did not match the panic in my chest. She knelt beside me and signed, "You are safe." I stared, stunned. She signed again, "I know your language." I wept not from pain, but from recognition. She helped me stand, wrapped me in her shawl, and led me to a nearby camp, simple, warm, and smelling of sage and meat. She gave me soup, a place to rest, then sat across from me as I signed my story. All of it. When I finished, she touched my cheek and said aloud, "Your silence was never your burden. It was your mother tongue." I stayed with her for 2 days. In that time, she taught me new signs. Older ones. Deeper ones. She called herself Lark, said her people had always used hands to speak to the world, and that it was the world that needed to listen better. She looked me in the eye and said, "You were not born broken. You were born different. And different frightens weak men." On the 3rd day, I asked for help finding my way back. She nodded. "But only if you are returning to stay." I knew then. I had not left Silas because I did not trust him. I left because I still did not trust myself to be loved. But I wanted to try. And trying meant going home. Lark walked with me to the edge of the ridge and pointed toward the wide, flat land that cradled the Boone Ranch below. The house looked small from that distance, smoke curling from its chimney like a beacon. I clutched the shawl she had lent me and stared down at the home I had abandoned. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded, hands trembling. She gave me one final gift, a handmade pouch of herbs to calm fear, and a whispered truth. "You were not saved, Ella Mae. You survived. There is power in that." Then I walked. Each step hurt. My ribs ached from the fall, my feet were torn raw, and my pride was nothing but threadbare cloth. But my heart beat steady, certain. When I reached the gate, I stopped. Not out of fear, but reverence. I was not returning to beg. I was returning to begin again. The sun was low, casting everything in gold. I stepped through the gate, unsure if anyone had seen me. But before I could take another step, the front door burst open, and Silas ran toward me like a storm in reverse, wide-eyed, breathless. He stopped a few feet away, hands shaking. I signed, "I am sorry." He shook his head hard. "No," he whispered. "I should have never let you leave alone." I stepped closer. He reached for my hand. I let him. Then I signed, "I was afraid you would be punished because of me." His jaw clenched. "You are not something bad that happened to me, Ella. You are the only thing that ever made sense." I cried then, but not from sadness. He pulled me close, slow, gentle, as if touching a miracle he dared not break. And for the first time, I let him hold all of me. Not just my body. My story. My silence. My return. He carried me inside, sat me down, then reached beneath the table and pulled out my old notebook. It was worn now, pages creased, cover smudged. "I read it," he said quietly. "All of it." I froze. But then he added, "And I still love you." Something inside me cracked wide open, and instead of bleeding, it bloomed. He told me what happened after I left. He had searched every creek and cabin, sent riders, rode himself until he collapsed in the saddle. Townfolk whispered, of course. Said I ran. Said maybe he had done something wrong. But he did not care. I was ready to burn the world down to find you. I touched his face, signed, I choose you. Not because I need to, but because I want to. He kissed my palms. Then he brought out a package from a drawer, a small, wooden box tied in twine. Inside it, a silver ring. Simple. Honest. I was waiting for the right day, he said. But maybe today's the day we stop waiting. I nodded. We would not marry yet, not officially. Not until I stood tall in my own skin. But the promise was there, etched in the silence between us. Later that week, I returned to the wildflower field and buried a stone from Lark's camp there, like planting a memory. And when the apple trees bloomed fully that spring, I wrote my name in the soil beneath one of them. Not Ella Mae Holloway the mute. Just Ella. Whole. Heard. Home. That spring, I woke each day with something I had never known before, purpose. Not survival. Not fear. But something steadier. Like roots. The air felt warmer, the sky wider. My feet still bore scars, but they were mine now. Earned. Proof that I could leave and return and still be whole. Silas treated me no different after I came back. He still brought me coffee in silence. Still brushed the hair from my cheek with the same quiet awe, like I might disappear if he blinked too long. But now I met his eyes. Now I smiled first. I began walking into town again, at first with Silas beside me, then later on my own. The stares still came, but I no longer dropped my gaze. I met them, held them, let them wonder. At the mercantile, I signed my requests with a firm hand. The shopkeeper's wife, a round woman with a braid down her back, pulled me aside after the third visit. My sister's daughter's gone mute, she whispered. Doctors say she's got a weak mind, but I think maybe she's just scared. She looked at me, eyes soft. Would you teach her? I said nothing, just nodded. That afternoon, the girl came. Her name was Mary Beth. 10 years old. Big eyes, shy shoulders. She would not meet mine at first. But I saw something in her. Something raw and trembling, like a bird unsure if its wings could carry it. I brought out a slate, drew the alphabet, showed her my name, then hers. She smiled, just barely. The next week, 2 more children came. By the end of the month, I was teaching twice a week under the oak tree behind the cabin. I had no certificate, no title, just my story. And somehow that was enough. Silas built benches from spare wood. Painted a sign, Ella's School for the Quiet-Hearted. He hung it with care, hammering the nails slow, like each one sealed something sacred. At night, I wrote lesson plans in my journal. Drew pictures. Practiced my own words, mouthing them silently as I read them over and over again. I still had no voice, but I had language. And that was more powerful than I ever imagined. One day, I walked out to the wildflower field and stood there alone, watching the petals dance like laughter in the breeze. Silas found me there. He did not speak, just placed a hand on my shoulder and signed, "You brought life back to this place." I looked around, and I saw it was true. The apple trees were heavy with bloom. The garden had rows of sprouting green. The ranch hands tipped their hats to me now, not with pity, but with respect. Even the wind seemed softer. And then that Sunday, I stood at the front of the little town chapel, my slate in hand, Mary Beth beside me, and taught the whole congregation how to say hope with their fingers. The preacher wept, and when he prayed, he used his hands, too. That night, as Silas and I sat on the porch beneath the wide sky, I wrote one final note in the notebook he gave me months ago. I may never speak with my mouth, but I have learned to speak with every part of who I am. He took the notebook, pressed it to his heart, and said, "And every part of you speaks beauty." Then he added, eyes bright, "One day, if we have a daughter, I hope she has your strength." I smiled, then signed, "Only if she also has your silence." Because from his silence, I had found my voice. It was not long before folks stopped calling me that mute girl. Now they called me Miss Ella, or the one who teaches without talking. Children ran up to me in the market, signing clumsy words with big grins. Old men tipped their hats. Even the sheriff, once cold-eyed and wary, nodded to me with a touch of shame in his eyes. I had not asked to be respected. I had only asked to be seen. But once I stood still long enough to grow roots, people began to look again. And this time they saw something whole. The ranch changed, too. Silas hired 2 more hands, one of them a boy who had lost his hearing from scarlet fever. I taught him signs, and he taught me how to braid rope tighter than any man I knew. We had a rhythm, all of us. Chores in the morning, laughter at midday, lessons at sundown. Evenings were quiet, warm, filled with the smell of stew and the creak of porch chairs as we watched stars blink into being. But the biggest change came quietly. One afternoon, I stood in the kitchen with Silas, watching the bread rise in the oven. I felt different. Off balance, but not in a bad way. I placed a hand over my belly and looked at him. He noticed right away. "What is it?" I took a breath, deep and sure, and signed slowly. "I think I am with child." He stared for a long moment, silent still. Then he stepped forward and fell to his knees, resting his hands on my waist. And then he spoke, soft and steady. "Thank you." It was not for the child. Not entirely. It was for the trust. For the life I had chosen to build beside him. We did not speak of names yet. It was too soon. But every day after, he left small things by my bed. A blanket knitted by his mother, a wooden toy horse he had carved in his youth, a Bible with a silk ribbon tucked inside. And I began writing letters to the child inside me. Tiny notes, folded and stored in a jar, for the day they would ask about where they came from. You were made from silence, but not sadness. You were born of stillness, but never neglect. Your mama walked through fire and came out with love on her heels. Each note a thread in the quilt I was sewing with my heart. That spring, I hosted the first Silent Sunday gathering in the town square. We taught everyone a hymn in signs, no voices, no instruments. Just hands rising and falling like birds in flight. When we finished, the entire town stood in reverent silence. And then one child clapped. Then another. Then all of them. It was louder than any sermon. Afterward, the preacher took my hands in his and said, "You did not just teach us how to speak. You taught us how to listen." That night, I sat on the porch with my hands resting on the life growing inside me, and I whispered, not out loud, but in the space between my heartbeat and the stars. This is who I am now. Not the girl who was sold. Not the one who ran. Not the mute girl. But Ella Mae Boone. Teacher. Mother. Beloved. Whole. Has silence ever taught you something words never could? I would love to hear about it. It was near harvest when the past came knocking one final time. I was out in the garden, pulling carrots from the soil with Mary Beth and the other children, when I heard the hoofbeats. Slow. Mean. Vernon. He had returned, this time with a deputy from the next county over. A man who did not know me or Silas or anything about truth. They rode up bold as brass, right into the front yard. I stood slowly, dust on my apron, hand resting on the curve of my belly. Silas came from the barn, rake still in his grip. He looked at Vernon the way thunder looks at dry land, ready. The deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, this man says you were taken against your will. Says you were sold unlawfully." I signed, firm and fast. "He is lying." The deputy frowned. "Can you speak plainly, miss?" Silas stepped beside me. "She is speaking. You just have not learned how to listen." Vernon scoffed. "She cannot testify. She is dumb as dirt and always has been." I stepped forward then, shoulders square. Mary Beth handed me my slate. I wrote quick, bold letters. I was born free. I was sold like a mule. I was never asked, never wanted. But I belong here. I chose this life. I will not go. The deputy read it aloud, his voice softening with each line. He looked to Vernon, then to me. "You've got people who'll vouch for this?" I nodded. The town would. The children would. Even the preacher, who stood behind his pulpit each week and prayed with his hands now. The deputy looked me over once more, then turned to Vernon. "You wasting my time, mister?" Vernon sputtered, red-faced. "She's my sister." The deputy shrugged. "She's a grown woman. Not chained. Not harmed. Seems to me, she's the only one here telling the truth." Vernon's hand went to his coat, and for a moment the air stilled. But Silas moved faster. Dropped the rake. Pulled his revolver. Kept it steady. "Do not," he said low. "You raise your hand to her, and I will raise more than dust." Vernon froze. Then turned, cursed the sky, and rode off, spitting hate into the dirt behind him. The deputy lingered a moment longer, then tipped his hat to me. "Sorry for the trouble, Miss Boone." I nodded, and he rode away. When it was done, I sat on the porch with Mary Beth curled beside me. Silas brought out 2 cups of cider, one warm, one cold. He handed me the warm one. We did not speak for a while. Then I signed, "Thank you for standing." He smiled. "You are the one who stood." And he was right. For the first time in my life, I had not run. I had faced the man who once made me feel like less than nothing. And I had not shrunk. That night, the children sang a hymn outside my cabin window, one I had taught them with only hands. Their laughter rose into the stars. And inside, Silas and I rested. No fear left in our bones, no shadows at our door. Just peace. Hard won. Well earned. And ours. I walk slower these days. Not because I am weak, but because I have no reason to rush. The world used to feel like a place that would leave me behind if I did not chase it. Now it waits for me. The wildflower field is taller than ever this summer. It stretches past the cedar grove in every color God ever dreamed. Some mornings I sit there with my child, our daughter, Hope, watching bees move from bloom to bloom. She has Silas's eyes and my quiet. When she was born, the midwife cried before I did. I was too stunned, too full of awe. Hope did not wail. She blinked, reached, wrapped her whole hand around my pinky, and held it like a promise. She is 2 now, quick on her feet, always asking questions in both words and signs. She signs mama and safe without thinking. She kisses her papa's cheek every night before bed. Sometimes, I wonder if she will understand just how long I waited for her. How long I feared I would never be anyone's safe. She is growing up on soil that has been softened by tears and made rich by forgiveness. She will never know the sting of being called less. Not if I can help it. The school has grown, too. We meet in the old grain shed now, walls painted bright yellow, sunlight pouring in through hand-cut windows. I teach 10 children each week, all different, all beautiful in their own way. Mary Beth helps now. She is older, stronger. She speaks in a soft voice but signs with confidence. Sometimes, I catch her standing a little straighter, watching the wind like it might carry her somewhere good. And Silas? He talks more than he used to. Still quiet, but sure. Every morning, he asks what I need. Every night, he tells me 3 things he is thankful for. Sometimes he even sings, low and off-key, but just for me. We married under the same apple tree that bloomed that first spring. The preacher asked if I wanted vows read aloud or written down. I smiled, then signed them with my hands. I vow to never hide again. I vow to listen with love. I vow to choose this life every day, no matter what silence or storm comes. He signed his back, word for word. No one made a sound, but no one needed to. That was the thing about our story. It was never built on noise. It was built on stillness, on courage, on love so quiet it echoed. Now, in the quiet moments, when dusk paints gold on the porch rail, when Hope's laughter drifts from the barn, when Silas reaches for my hand without needing to speak, I know. I was never broken. I was never less. I was only waiting for the right heart to hear me. Some folks think strength is loud, that it comes with shouting, with stomping, with demanding your place at the table. But I learned different. My strength lived in silence. In the way I kept going when no one clapped. In the way I stood still when the world told me to run. In the way I loved, soft and steady, even after life tried to teach me not to. Silas did not save me. He saw me. That is a kind of salvation all its own. And I did not heal by becoming someone new. I healed by returning to who I was before the world taught me shame. Now, when I sit beneath the stars and hold my daughter's hand, I remember the girl I was. The one who stood on an auction block with dust in her throat and fear in her belly. She never dreamed of love. She only dreamed of peace. She got both. If you are listening now and feel unheard, if you feel like you have been passed around, misunderstood, or labeled something you are not, I want you to know, you are not broken. You are becoming. Your silence might just be waiting for the right moment to speak. And when it does, it will be mighty. Thank you for spending time with Ella Mae's story. If this touched your heart, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Which part of Ella's journey reminded you of your own? Or simply type "still becoming" if you are on your own quiet path. And if you would like more Wild West stories of lost women, gentle men, and hard-won hope, click follow so you never miss the next one. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting to be heard. And they just might be you.